I'd like to start by acknowledging the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, who are the traditional custodians of the lands I'm speaking to you from today. I'd like to acknowledge all traditional custodians across the lands we're all joining from, and pay respects to elders past, present, and emerging. I'd also like to acknowledge that sovereignty has never been ceded. Hi everyone, welcome to this year's Perinatal Mental Health Speaker Series. Before we get started, a little note on content. As we're talking about pregnancy, parenting, and mental health, some of the topics we talk about may be a bit upsetting. If you feel concerned or distressed by any of this content, please contact one of the numbers or services listed in the video description. This week, we're chatting to people about their real experiences with perinatal mental health, the ups and downs, the challenges, and of course, the hope, to help dispel the stigma and shame around parenting and mental health. Today, I'm honoured to be speaking with Dimmie. Dimmie is a queer artist living in Aotearoa, New Zealand, with her whānau. She has 2 children, 1 living, and experienced mental illness since her adolescence. Hi, Dimmie. Thank you for joining us.
Hi, you're welcome.
To start with, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your experiences with perinatal mental health?
So I have 2 children. My eldest child, my living child, just turned 2. I have a history of mental health problems, but kind of had been doing fairly well. And then I got pregnant with Gabe, and it was very much a wanted pregnancy. And then my mental health went questionable very early on and kind of did not recover until well after he was born. So, yeah, lots of anxiety and low mood and things like that, lots of worrying about things.
It's really interesting to hear that you had the tools from your own previous experiences with mental health, but pregnancy threw it all in disarray.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was something where, because it was like a wanted, desired, very much tried for pregnancy, you expect that going into the pregnancy that you'll be really happy and feel really great. And that just wasn't true for me. Like, pregnancy was really hard and my mental health was really bad. And there was a lot of shame around feeling like, oh, well, I should be happy, but I'm not. You know what I mean? Like, yeah.
Yeah. And I think pregnancy can be a stressful time, even under the best circumstances. To what sort of extent do you feel like that expectation of stress combined with the expectation that you should be happy contributed to maybe masking some of the mental health symptoms you experience?
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like I definitely delayed getting support for my mental health because it felt like very much that poor mental health was part of my past, and I did not want to admit that it might be part of my present and therefore my future. So definitely, yes. There was, in this feeling of like, oh, you must be so excited. And it's like, yeah, I am, but also, have a lot of anxiety about the what ifs and things like that. And we did have kind of like a tumultuous pregnancy with some health concerns and things like that. And so that didn't help with anxiety as well, because you're always expecting things to maybe not go as well as you hope, Yeah.
Yeah. And with your health difficulties, I know we were speaking earlier about you experiencing being hospitalized, not just for the birth process, but earlier in the pregnancy as well. What was that like, and how did that play into that, mental health versus excitement thing for you?
Yeah. So I experienced a hemorrhage with my first child at 19 weeks, which was terrifying. And although it had stopped relatively quickly, it was still pretty scary. I went to the hospital to get checked out and everything was fine, got sent home. And then, the wheels of anxiety started to turn faster and faster and faster. I was 37 weeks when I had another much larger hemorrhage, and I spent the night in hospital. By that point, it had stopped and everything was fine. My baby was fine. But continues on, with everything that goes wrong, the anxiety, then, you have like this dialogue in your head of, well, this could go wrong or this could go wrong. And then every time something potentially does go wrong, it's like, see, I told you. And then I had, obviously, with my second pregnancy, I had quite a severe hemorrhage, which led to the loss of my child. So yes, hemorrhages, not so good for me, and definitely not so good for my mental health.
No, and it was really interesting what you said there about anything that goes wrong plays into the existing anxiety, and it's very difficult to recognize the things that are not going wrong, especially when you keep getting that confirmation.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like your worst case scenario kind of feels like it's getting closer and closer, and it may not happen. Obviously, I have a very, very energetic 2-year-old to prove that, things don't always go wrong, but your brain is not as logical as that. So yeah.
No. Certainly not.
I always talk about like my Vulcan brain. Like I have to turn on my Vulcan brain to figure out what is a logical anxiety and what isn't.
I like that framing.
I know.
So what about with Gabe after you gave birth? What were things like for you then?
Oh, really hard. They always talk about like the 3 days postpartum with the big hormonal change that you have a very deep low. For me, that was very, very bad, particularly in the middle of the night. So, it's looking back, I have context, but basically I had low milk supply. So I had been struggling with that. And Gabe was not getting enough to eat and therefore was very unsettled in a way that is not normal for newborns. So I want to phrase that very clearly that, newborns, are unsettled. They do cluster feed and all those things, but sometimes that behavior is not normal. And for me, it was not normal. So I was not getting a whole lot of sleep, both because he was awake a lot, but also because I was too afraid to sleep. So at, that 3 or 4 day mark, I was very, very low. I did have an incredible partner and an incredible team of midwives that assisted me and supported me. And then, we go on a couple more weeks and I thought that I was having a stroke. So I experienced one-sided weakness, slurring of, my one side of my face had dropped and things like that. All those things that they tell you are very scary and are a stroke. And I went into hospital and spent a few days in hospital. So while this was all going on, they also discovered that I'd had like a much larger hemorrhage postpartum than they believed initially, as well as having a neurological problem. So I didn't have a stroke, thank goodness. Turned out I had been having silent migraines, which sometimes present in this specific way. And then, so while all this is going on, we also have my baby whose weight is plunging, basically, is not gaining weight at all. And dealing with a lot of shame and a lot of terror and a lot of not sleeping and Googling endlessly about what's going on and what my solutions are, and things in my head not going very well. Yeah.
Really interesting. A lot of people talk about like the pressure to appear to be a good parent, or even, an ideal parent. But, with so many complications there, I'd love to hear your take on, and maybe even your Vulcan brain take on that intersection of societal pressure on parents and, complications, difficulties that do happen for parents, such as low milk supply.
Mm-hmm. So I had this great idea when I was pregnant that I was going to breastfeed my child exclusively. I very strongly believe that, breast milk is fantastic and wonderful. And I didn't buy any bottles. I didn't buy any formula. I was like, no, this is going to work for me. It's worked for everybody else in my family. There's no reason why it shouldn't work for me. And then suddenly this thing happened where it wasn't that easy. And, the effect that feeling like I could not provide for my child in the way that I felt that I should or that was expected of me was very hard. And I have a lot of, I want to say, trauma around that, around feeling like I was starving my baby. And how that affected me, and also being in the situation where people were being like, oh well, low milk supply is really rare, and like this invalidation of what I was experiencing. Yeah, that was not great. So that kind of pressure about how people expect you to feed your child, or people being like, oh well, any choice you make is valid, and there's nothing wrong with formula. And it's like, but I didn't really have a choice specifically. It was either I feed my child formula or they starve. So it's like, yes, choice is great, but it's not choice if there is no choice. You know what I mean? Am I rambling? Yeah.
But it's, I think what you said about trauma is very valid, and it's almost like a kind of grieving for a part of the parent-child relationship that you had thought would be there.
Yeah, I definitely had like these visions of, nursing my child in a comfy chair and just being able to whip out a boob and feed him in restaurants and things like that. And I had no shame whatsoever around, breastfeeding in public or anything like that. But I used to hide in my car to give him a bottle. And that's like because I didn't want people looking at me and judging the choice, we've just discussed that, the choice that I'd made, to feed my child. And, I had a lot of supportive people that were like, you shouldn't feel ashamed for how you're feeding your child. And it's like, absolutely 100% agree with that. But at the time, when you're dealing with like parenting a little person and not knowing how, because I've never been a parent before and they've never been a baby before, and you're kind of figuring this out together, it doesn't, yeah, it's hard.
Yeah. So with all the complications and conflagrations and the expectations, I'm wondering what was it that sort of helped you realize, well, actually the mental health is something I need help with now?
Mm-hmm. So I basically went through a period where I was thinking, I can't provide for my baby, I'm not enough for my baby, and then having this spiral downwards about, I'm not enough, not good enough, maybe better off without me, and all of those horrible spiraling thoughts that I'm sure lots of people have and are not true. Yeah, I don't know how else to say that, but it's not true. It's not true. Yeah.
And we get a lot of people asking what they can do to support people they care about or people around them. You mentioned having some great midwives around you. What sort of support did you find most helpful?
I feel like just validating the things that I was doing. I had ended up getting in contact with a lactation consultant, and she said, you were doing everything that you can, like you cannot do any more than you were doing. And that was like the most helpful and supportive and validating thing anybody had said to me, was that you don't have to keep striving for the next level of trying. Like, you are enough, like you are doing enough, you are doing the best that you possibly can in the situation that you have. And that was just so validating to me, that that is what really helped, was having my effort seen and valued.
Yeah, I really like that. I think as parents, we can often feel like nothing we do is enough. So having somebody external that the Vulcan brain can't argue with, validating.
Exactly. Yeah. Although always argue with myself about it, but definitely like to be seen and to say, I can see what you are doing, and I can see all of the love and care and effort that you are going to feed your baby, to care for your baby, to love your baby. That being seen and validated was huge for me. Yeah. And above and beyond like that, after my second son died, Willow, his name is, a group of people organized a meal train where they just made food and dropped it off. They were like, we're coming around, don't answer the door, we're just going to put it on your doorstep. Okay, it's there, bye. Like, that was huge. Like, to have food just given to me with no expectation of conversation, not having to go to the door to say hello or whatever, just here's your food, let it nourish you. Like, that was like, as a physical thing that you can do for somebody, make them food. Absolutely. Yeah, because you spend so much time making food, preparing food, and that can sometimes be too much effort to expend when maybe you're not feeling the best, where it's like, I'm sure we've all had those moments where actually getting food is too much. Like, I just do not have the energy to do that. So just having something there that you could pick up and eat immediately without having to chop and stir and prep and whatever is huge. It's a huge gift to give someone, just food without any expectations. Like, just don't have expectations, like, of people who need your help. Just give freely. Yeah.
I like that. And Dimmie, you mentioned Willow, your second child, and I know that you've chosen to share a lot of that story on social media with the people around you. Can you tell us about what that experience has been like, sharing the grief and loss of a child?
So I feel like grieving and death and things like that are sometimes really hard for people. And so sometimes I feel like I really internalize that, where I feel like, am I grieving too publicly? Do people want me to be quiet? Are people uncomfortable with this? Are people uncomfortable with hearing about it? But yeah, I really like talking about these things, because I feel like through this journey, I've learned a lot of people have experienced very similar things and may not have had the opportunity to very openly feel the things that they feel, or not have the opportunity to reach out to tons of followers and say, I'm in pain, and have people validate them and tell them that their feelings are valid. Did valid a lot.
Yeah.
Validate people.
Yeah.
That's my tagline.
And having seen some of the posts about Willow, especially the really beautiful photos, as an observer, and this might be different for you, but it feels like it's a way to celebrate who Willow is, and the possibility, but also the love and the joy that you have for Willow.
Yeah, so I really people wouldn't feel ashamed about posting photos of their other children, you know what I mean? And so I never wanted to feel ashamed of sharing, the photos that I have of Willow. I was very, very fortunate that we had access to a volunteer photographer who did a photo shoot with myself and Willow. So, I have lots of beautiful photos of Willow, and I like to share them, and yeah, sometimes they're hard to look at, and they're hard to look at and know that the little person in the photos isn't alive, and that's hard, but they're still a little person, you know what I mean? So yeah.
I think it's really meaningful, again, as an outside observer, to see that, and to be able to normalize and validate that experience.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you mentioned earlier having struggled or experienced, and in some cases overcome mental health challenges for quite a long time. And I know that you're also very vocal and open about your mental health experiences. What have been some, or what are some of the best parts about being a parent who's experienced mental health challenges?
I feel like I'm in a much better position to be able to discuss this, like with my children as they grow older. Obviously, Gabe is not really at the age where he understands the ins and outs of mental health. He's just grasping feelings at the moment. But hopefully being able to be really open with him about these things, in a way that maybe I wouldn't be able to if I hadn't had these experiences, So I'd hope that by having these discussions with him and being open with him, that he would feel like being open about mental health, not necessarily with me, but, with his peers or whatever, that it's okay to talk about these things and, to grow and to need help and things like that. And yeah, I wouldn't say it's like a superpower or anything like that. We all wish that we hadn't experienced the things that we had, but definitely silver lining there is, it's good to talk to someone and hear from someone that has experienced the same things or similar things, rather than hearing about it in theory from someone. So I feel like that is going to help a lot, that when I talk about these things, then he'll know that, not talking out my ass, like I have the things to back it up, like.
And also, the experience of having a parent who knows the importance of validation and validating emotions and experiences.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, I know we all want to do better than, our parents before us, but yeah, definitely learning and having access to things and to learn about how to approach these conversations with kids is like really valuable. And, something that I hope to have like an open, sharing family, Yeah.
Dimmie, thank you so much for sharing your story with us today. It's been so wonderful to chat with you and hear about your experiences. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Thank you everyone for watching. You can find more information about perimental health. You can order resources and download resources and find contact information for us and other services through our website, pnda.wayahead.org.au. Thank you all. Have a great day.